Things aren't as they should be. The Buddha's answer to fatalistic karma. The common understanding of the Buddha's teachings on karma is that all the pleasures and pains you experience right now come from your past actions. There's no way you can avoid them. But there are actually two places in the canon where the Buddha refutes that idea as being totally antithetical to what he taught. There's one case where he hears that there are other people who teach that, so he goes and challenges them. Is it true that you teach this? They say, yes. Then in that case, people are murderers. They steal. They have illicit sex. They lie. They take intoxicants because of what was done in the past. In other words, they have no choice in what they're going to do right now. They have no freedom to choose whether or not to do these things. When you teach that, the Buddha said, you leave people unprotected and bewildered. Now, bewildered is the term he uses for our ordinary reaction to suffering. Suffering comes in ways that we don't understand. If you think that everything that you're going to experience in terms of suffering or pleasure right now comes from past actions, there's nothing you can do about it. As the Buddha said, there wouldn't even be an idea of things that should or should not be done, because everything was already ordained by past actions. Anyone who taught that everything was already ordained by past actions, the Buddha said, doesn't deserve to be called a contemplative. That, for him, was strong criticism. The other time was when someone comes and asks the Buddha, is it the case that all pleasures and pains come from what was done in the past? The Buddha replies, even the world knows that that's not the case. Then he gives a list of the different sources of pains, a list based on the medical theory of the time for why we have pain. Sometimes it has to do with bile, sometimes with phlegm, sometimes with the wind energies in the body, all of which, in the Buddha's analysis, would be coming from past actions. But then there are other things you're doing right now, that could also give rise to pain. So here he's making the point that you can take the analogy of a doctor. If everything you experienced in terms of pleasure and pain depended on past actions, there would be nothing a doctor could do for you. There'd be no medicinal treatment for you. You can't go back and change what you did, so you'd simply have to bear with the pains or pleasures until they just ran out on their own. And they're certainly not going to run out on their own, because you keep on doing things. So it's a really important part of the Buddha's teachings that what you're experiencing right now, particularly in terms of pleasure and pain, is not totally dependent on the past. There are some influences coming in from the past, of course, but what's really important is what you're doing right now, and you have the freedom to choose what to do right now. This is why doctors can treat patients. This is why we can get something out of our meditation. There are things we can change. Sometimes we're told that awakening comes when you see, basically, that this is the way things are. But that term that's usually translated as knowledge and vision of the way things are, yatha bhuta jnana dasana, really means knowledge and visions of how things become. In other words, understanding the process of causality. Meditation is not just simply a matter of watching. You're doing something, or as the Buddha says, you commit and then you reflect. You're learning about cause and effect. This is why, when the Buddha gave his shortest description of his awakening, it was the principle of causality, in which some influences take time to bear fruit, and others bear fruit immediately. When X exists, Y will exist. When X doesn't exist, I doesn't exist. It's immediate. It's in the present moment, and that's where you have your freedom. Which is why what you're doing right now, meditating on the breath, can make a difference. Or if you're meditating on goodwill, meditating on the parts of the body, whatever you're doing right now can make a difference. To make a good difference, you have to be confident that you really can make a difference. Without that confidence, what are you doing here? So be confident that, yes, your choices do make a difference. Things are not totally determined by the past. things aren't as they should be. There's a phrase you hear many times in Buddhist circles that you have to accept that things are the way they should be. There's one way in which that's right, but a lot of ways in which it's wrong. It's right in the sense that, given the past and present conditions, you can't complain because this is the raw material you have to work with. But you don't just let it sit there and say, well, that's just the way it's got to be. That's what you're presented with, but you can learn skills to deal with what's coming up in the present moment and to handle it well. If you don't have the skills, then no matter what good things are coming up in the present moment, you can suffer from them. Like the instructions to relax as you meditate, some people turn them into a real burden, a harsh duty that they have to do. Relax. Try to have a better attitude toward it. You're allowed to relax. You're allowed to take things easy, not in the sense of being lazy, but in the sense that when you're trying to work with the breath, you don't have to be very tight about it. You don't clamp down on it. You loosen up and try to listen to it. Listen to the body. What does it need? Have a sense of what the body seems to be trying to get as it breathes in, as it breathes out. It breathes in quest of well-being, so what direction is it leading? That's an example of how, with even a very relaxed set of instructions, if you don't take it right, you can suffer from it. Or the instructions on goodwill. We start out with certain phrases on goodwill as a way of educating ourselves. May all beings understand the causes of their true happiness and be willing and able to act on them. May all beings look after themselves with ease. May they be happy. But as you cultivate that attitude, you don't have to keep on repeating the phrases. As with every form of meditation where there's a phrase that you repeat, there comes a point where, if you really want the mind to settle down, you have to drop the phrase and just be with the feeling tone. What you're doing right now can make a difference if you understand, if you have a set of skills to handle whatever comes up. But you do have to accept the fact that you've got a certain set of raw materials you're working with here, coming from your past actions. So in that sense, the idea that things are as they should be helps you to develop an attitude of equanimity. This is what you've got to work with. But you don't stop there. And this is where the idea that things are as they should be is actually very harmful. On the one hand, it seems to imply, well, it's good that they're this way. Or else, on the other hand, it's they have to be this way. Neither is true. The world didn't have to be the way it is now, and it's certainly not good the way it is now. People have made choices, some very bad choices, but they didn't have to make those bad choices. In the same way that you don't have to make bad choices right now. You look at the way the world is and you realize, okay, this is an example of what happens when people are not careful, when they lack skill. The wise response to that is to decide that you want to be careful to develop some skill. You do that by acting and then looking at the results you get so that you can get better results the next time around. That's what you can learn from the meditation. We're not here to simply see things as they are. We're here to see how things have come about and learning from that, how they can be made to come about, how things can be. You can take something simple like this, the fact that you're talking to yourself about the breath, focusing on the breath. You have a perception of the breath, an image of how the breath flows in the body. You're trying to create a feeling of well-being. Okay, that's the activity. You can watch yourself doing that activity and you'll learn a lot. In the beginning, the focus is mainly on the breath. As you get more skilled at that, then that focus turns to, what is the mind doing around the breath? You're committing yourself to this practice and then you reflect, all around. That way, you start seeing things about the mind that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, when the mind wasn't so gathered, and these things can make a difference. They can actually take you all the way to the end of suffering. They can open you up to a dimension that you wouldn't have expected, the dimension the Buddha calls the deathless. It's striking how much he talks about the deathless, especially at the beginning of his teaching career, and what a key role it plays in his teachings. When he decided to teach, after Sahampati Brahma had come and pleaded with him, the Buddha surveyed the world and saw, "Oh, it's true. There are those who would benefit." Then the first thing he said was, "Open are the doors to the deathless. Let those with ears show forth their conviction." When he went to teach the 5 brethren, even before he said anything about the middle way or the 4 noble truths, he said, "The deathless has been attained, and if you follow what I teach you, you can attain it too." When Sariputta heard a very short synopsis of the Buddha's teachings and gained the Dhamma eye, he went back to see his friend, Moggallana. Moggallana, looking at him, said, "Your faculties are very bright. Have you attained the deathless?" It's a simple concept that there could be this dimension, but there was some discussion of this concept at that time about what it actually meant. There were those who thought that to be deathless, you had to find an unending source of food. In other words, you'd be deathless in time. What the Buddha discovered, though, is that you can experience the deathless only if you step outside of time, and you can do that. It's a possibility, a dimension where there's no need for food. If you commit yourself to this practice and are really reflective and observant, you see that things are the way they are, and in this sense, they're not necessarily the way they should be, simply that there's an orderliness to them. The Buddha never said the orderliness was good or bad, but it can be used. You can take advantage of it to reach the deathless. That's the good thing. This is why there's that strange passage at the end of the sutta where the king Ajatasattu comes to see the Buddha, and the Buddha gives him one of the longest and most detailed Dhamma talks in the whole canon. At the end, all the king can think about is that he wished he hadn't killed his father. He leaves, and the Buddha addresses the monks. "The king has cut himself off at the root," he says. "If he hadn't killed his father, he would have gained the Dhamma eye right here, in this very seat." Then the sutta says, "Gratified, the monks delighted in the Blessed One's words." It sounds a little heartless, but what they're delighting in is the orderliness of the Dhamma. And the reason they're delighted in it is because it doesn't favor wealthy people. It doesn't favor powerful people. It's the same for everybody. It can be misused and abused, but it can also be used to attain the deathless. That's what's good about it. There are a lot of things about causality, how it works itself out in the world, that are pretty horrifying. In terms of the cruel things that people can do to one another. The fact that things can be done to people means that they've probably got that kind of karma in their past. But that doesn't excuse the people who keep on doing cruel things. So the way things are is not necessarily as they should be. They're just the way they are. What you want to find out is things as they can be, and in particular what can be done to put an end to suffering. Because things are not totally determined by the past, it is possible to do this. So have a strong sense of the power you have here in the present moment. If you commit yourself to the practice and are really reflective, you can use that power to gain results that you wouldn't have expected. They exceed anything you can expect. Let that thought inspire you. Life in the Buddha's hospital. The Dhamma is like medicine. You can see this from the way the Buddha teaches. He starts off with the 4 noble truths, which are very much like an analysis of how to care for a disease. In his case, he's offering a cure for the basic disease of the mind, the suffering that comes from craving and ignorance. That's what we've got to cure. So he analyzes the symptoms of the disease, diagnoses it, explains its causation, discusses what it's like to be free of the disease, and then shows a path of treatment that leads to the end of the disease, to a state of health. It's important that we keep this in mind as we practice here together. We're working on the diseases of our own minds. Each of us has illnesses, and although the basic causes of illness are the same, craving, ignorance, our cravings are different. Our particular brands of ignorance are different as well. This is why we have to make allowances for each other, because different people have to undergo different courses of treatment. It's like going into a hospital. It's not the case that everyone in the hospital has the same diseases. Some people have cancer, some have heart diseases, some have liver diseases. Some people have diseases from eating too much, some from eating too little. There are all kinds of different diseases in the hospital, and it's the same way here in the monastery. We each have our own particular diseases, and our duty here is to take care of our own diseases without picking up diseases from other people. And at the same time, not getting upset that somebody else is taking a different kind of medicine than you are. Each of us has his or her own diseases requiring specific kinds of medicine. Some medicines are bitter and unpleasant to take. Other medicines are a lot easier to swallow. So each of us has his or her own course of treatment. It's important that we pay attention to our own course of treatment and not worry about the treatments of others. If some people don't seem to be recovering from their diseases as fast as you would like them to, well, again, it's their disease. Try to keep this in mind. Remember what Ajahn Lee says. When you look inside, it's Dhamma. When you look outside, it's the world. And it's not just that you're a detached observer looking at the world. Your whole mind becomes the world as well when you start focusing outside. This person does that. This person does this. That's the world, even if you use the categories of the Dhamma to judge the person. You've taken the Dhamma and you've turned it into the world. So you've got to keep your gaze focused inside. In other words, when you get upset at someone else, what is this quality of being upset? Focus on that. The events in the mind are the important issues. Those are the things causing your own illness. Do you want to cure your own illness or to aggravate it? Keep this question in mind as you practice. As we live together and practice together, we see each other a lot, but try to make that fact have the least possible impact on the mind. Try to turn your gaze inside. Even when you're looking outside, you want your focus to be inside. How is your mind reacting to this? How is your mind reacting to that? This is part of restraint of the senses. Several years back, we had an elderly visitor from Thailand who was very serious about practicing restraint of the senses. She kept her eyes down and hardly talked to anyone. And then she overheard other people talking about how stuck up and unfriendly she was because she was trying to be so quiet and unresponsive. So she came to me to complain about how other people were not respecting her restraint of the senses. Of course, what kind of restraint is that? Getting upset over what other people are saying about you. Restraint is purely an internal matter. As you go through life, you have to hear things, see things, taste things, touch things, think about things. The point of restraint is that you don't make those things the main focus. The process of how the mind reacts to the seeing, how it directs the seeing, and so on with the other senses, that should be your focus. If issues come up and aggravate the illness in the mind, how are you going to deal with it? The Buddha laid out a lot of medicines for us to choose. The chant on the 32 parts of the body. That's basically a reminder of his medicines for dealing with attachment to your own body and lust for the bodies of others. The chant on the 4 sublime attitudes. That's for dealing with not only anger, but also with resentment, jealousy, any cruel intentions in your mind. Many times you can get worked up about things totally beyond your control. That's when you should reflect on the principle of karma to develop equanimity. There are antidotes for all these diseases, and our duty here is to use them. Because after all, who's suffering because of our diseases? Other people may be suffering to some extent, but we're really suffering. We suffer very little from what other people do, and a great deal from the lack of skill in our own minds. In the canon, the Buddha talks about how people should not give in to craving and conceit. And when we look at other people, it's obvious that he's right. Their craving and conceit are obviously causing trouble. The trick, though, lies in seeing our own craving, our own conceit. If you find yourself using these teachings to judge other people, stop and ask yourself, well, wait a second, am I the National Bureau of Standards? Then turn around and look at yourself. What about your own craving? You want things to be a certain way and then they aren't the way you want them to be. This is a very important lesson I learned with Ajahn Fuang. He always seemed to fall sick at times that were extremely inconvenient for me. I'd have some project going on around the monastery, and it always seemed that just when I was really getting into the project, he got sick and I had to drop everything to look after him. I began to notice the sense of frustration growing within me, and I finally realized, hey, wait a minute. If I let go of the desire to finish that project, things go a lot more easily. At the same time, if I let go of my desire for him to care for his illness in the way I thought best, it made things a lot easier around the monastery, especially for me, and probably in no small measure for him as well. When you start running into that reality, realize your cravings are the things that are making you suffer, so those are the things you have to let go of. When you let go, you find you can live with all kinds of situations. Not that you become lazy or apathetic, just letting things be whatever way they want to be. You become selective. Where can you make a difference? Where can you not make a difference? Where is your craving helping you in the path? Where is it getting in the way? You have to learn how to be selective, how to be skillful in where you direct your wants, where you direct your aspirations. Again, the problem is not outside. The problem is inside. We do suffer to some extent from things outside, but the reason we suffer is because things inside are unskillful. That's what we have to work on. Once the inside problem is dealt with, the outside problems don't touch us at all. Conceit is another troublemaker. Conceit is not just puffing yourself up and thinking you're better than other people. According to the Buddha, it's the tendency of the mind to compare itself with others. Even if you say, I'm worse than that other person, or I'm equal to that other person, that's conceit. There's an I there, the I-making, mind-making, and tendency to conceit. That's a lot of the problem right there, a major cause of disease. The Buddha describes the sense of I am as the underlying cause for the mind's tendency to proliferate ideas, its tendency to make differentiations, to complicate things, and all the categories and conflicts that come from those complications. These all start with the I am. The basic verbalization of craving also starts with I am. It then goes on to I was, I will be, or am I not, and all the other questions that come up from putting the I and the am together and then identifying with them. You start comparing this I am to other people's, to your sense of what they are. So either you're better than they are, or you're equal, or you're worse. Whichever side you come down on, though, it's just a big troublemaker all around. Just keep remembering, other people's diseases are their diseases. They've got to cure them. They've got to take their medicine. Your diseases are yours, your prime responsibility. And if the person next to you in the hospital room is not taking his medicine properly, that's his problem. You can be helpful and encourage him, but there comes a time when you have to say, okay, that's his issue. I've got my own disease to take care of. This way, it's a lot easier for all of us. When these attachments, cravings, and conceits don't get in the way, then any place you practice becomes an ideal place to practice. People often ask, where is the best place to practice? And the answer is, right here in the here and now. It's actually the only place you can practice, but you can do things to make the here and now a better place to practice wherever you are, both for yourself and for the people around you. It's dependent not so much on changing things outside as it is on changing your inner attitudes. That way, the place where we're practicing becomes a good place to practice for us all.